All right, Mr. Speaker, thanks for sitting down and talking with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
This will be your second term as Speaker of the House. What have you learned from the previous term?
Well, I think it does take some time to kind of get the feel for running the House. It's an interesting job. Obviously, I'm the head of my own caucus, so that side of it becomes partisan. But you also, as Speaker, have a sense of wanting to protect the institution of the House and make sure that it runs properly. Part of that is making sure that the minority has a voice, but also we need to make sure that voice doesn't overtake the agenda of the majority. So, what have I learned? That's a good question. I think working with the governor and the Senate majority can be trying at times, obviously more so with the governor than with the Senate. We have a new majority in the Senate now, so I think that will change the dynamics a little bit. I think we need to send bills to the governor's desk earlier in session, and I hope now with the Republican majority in the Senate we can do that. I don't like when things get backed up at the end of session, and that wasn't something that's unique to me being Speaker. That's happened for the last quite a few years, 20 years at least, maybe more. And I think I'd like to get away from that this year. I think Minnesotans expect us to do a little bit better, and I think if we can do it earlier in session, I think that will be more transparent and give the public an opportunity to have some input in what we're passing. So that's what I'm hopeful we can accomplish this next year.
Republicans certainly did well both locally and nationally on Election Day. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for a number of reasons. I think number one, the economy has not improved in the way that I think Minnesotans had hoped or would expect. I think they do place the blame for that at the feet of Democrats. The policies that Democrats have put in place really haven't helped economic growth, and I think that's been something that's been a sore spot. You see it more out in greater Minnesota, and I think that's probably why you see us doing much better out in greater Minnesota. However, I also think this was a big referendum on Obamacare and on MNsure, and obviously the Dayton administration has failed miserably at implementing Obamacare here with their version, which we call MNsure, and it really is hurting Minnesota families. So I think they wanted to go a different direction. They know it needs to be fixed. I'm not sure Democrats have really come to the conclusion what's causing the problem and that there really is a problem. I think they know that the rates are skyrocketing, but it seems like they're too ready and too willing to try to blame other people for that, whether it be health plans or blame, the governor's latest is to blame Washington, D.C. Democrats here, including Governor Dayton, made promises to Minnesotans that Obamacare and MNsure here in Minnesota was going to reduce costs and it was going to provide better access and more choices for Minnesota families, and it has done exactly the opposite. So I think we certainly have a big mandate from the voters to clean up that mess and to fix that problem, and we are certainly willing to work with the Democrats because it's going to take all of us to fix it and to help Minnesotans. So we're definitely ready and willing to take that task up right away.
For the next 2 years, Republicans will hold the House and Senate majorities, but you still must work with DFL leadership and Governor Dayton to pass legislation. How will this be done?
Well, I think the governor does accept that there have been problems with MNsure and Obamacare. I think as I kind of analyze where I think they're at, I think that the governor would rather move to a single-payer system or what I would refer to as deeper into Obamacare, and I don't think that's the right direction. And I think Minnesotans spoke pretty clearly in the last election. They're rejecting those ideas. They'd like to go back to a more market-driven system that really will provide more choice and more access. And because of that, if we can draw more insurers into the marketplace, it will reduce the costs as well.
You've expressed support for more openness in the state lawmaking process. How does that occur under your leadership?
Well, number one, I'm gonna challenge the governor on day one. We start session on January 3rd this year. Obviously, I'm gonna invite the governor to participate in session starting right at the beginning, and we need his commissioners to come to committee. We need them to be authorized to negotiate and make decisions. I think our Constitution lays out a great form of government. It's not designed or supposed to be easy, but it is set to take place during a certain period of time and using a certain format. And I think in the past, governors have tried to leverage, obviously a bill has to pass the House and the Senate and get signed by the governor. That's how we do our state budgets. So, we basically hold the purse strings for the state. Governors have in the past, and this governor in particular has really kind of not participated well in the session, and in an effort to leverage his power, kind of forces you into negotiations at the end, and particularly if you get into a special session negotiation, he's the only one that can call a special session. And they use that power to kind of leverage and get more of what they want. And I get that, but that's not the system that we have, and that's not how it was designed to work. And the real losers under that scenario, sure, the governor may, it's his perception that he may get more of what he wants. I don't think that he actually does. But who gets cut out in that process is the general public. And I think we need to give the general public a voice. And their voice is really, to be in hearing rooms like this while these bills are brought up and while we discuss budget targets and the state's budget. They get to give input and testify and give their input. So I think that's pretty important, and that's the process we're going to use this year. I frankly am not going to give a lot of leeway to the governor if he doesn't participate in the session. I don't think if you don't participate in the session that's outlined and you don't get your work done and convince people in the legislature to support your priorities, that's not my job. My job is to promote my priorities and get support for them, and I use the legislative session to do that. The governor should do the same, and I'm not going to have a lot of interest in giving him extra innings if he doesn't complete his work on time.
The special session for healthcare, bonding, and taxes, it recently fell through. Does that set the tone?
I will say the tone right now is not good. That the governor has not done a lot to offer olive branches and to really build relationships. And I think that what's going to suffer is the governor's opportunity and ability to get his agenda passed into law. He needs legislative support for his priorities, and frankly, it's incumbent on him. It's his responsibility to sell not only the legislature but the public that his ideas are good, and it's his job to gain support for them. So unfortunately for the governor, this is a relationship business, and he does not do enough to build and maintain good relationships, and it's going to be difficult for the governor if he doesn't kind of change course and start to improve that working relationship.
And speaking of relationships, how would you describe your relationship with Representative Melissa Hortman?
We actually, Melissa's a great legislator. She's probably a little more of a policy wonk than I am, but she's good. She's somebody that I have worked with in the past. I think that I shouldn't have any trouble trusting her. And there are times, her and I have already had conversations. There are times when we, as the leaders of the House, and I have seen this from both sides as minority leader and as speaker, there are times when we need to talk about things that are could be potentially damaging to the institution, or things that we maybe need to change the direction and make them things that will be good or beneficial not only to the state but to the institution of the House. And her and I, as the leaders of our caucuses, need to have a good relationship, and we need to work together to make sure we accomplish that. But I look forward to working with her.
Healthcare, obviously a major issue. Safe to say, House File 1, Health Reform Bill?
Yes, House File 1. Obviously, I think reforming our health insurance system in the state of Minnesota for the individual marketplace is our #1 priority in the Minnesota House. I think it will come as no surprise that House File 1 will be a health care reform bill or a health insurance reform bill. We need to provide stability back to the individual marketplace. It is, I would say, I hate to even say it's on life support right now. I think there's a shell there, and we're going to have to put some premium relief state money in to help folks get through the next year. But I think we all need to understand that on January 1st of 2018, there will be no individual marketplace. So we need to take action during this legislative session to put some repairs in place that hopefully can draw some more insurers in and provide the stability that marketplace needs, so that folks can get the more affordable coverage and frankly, hopefully more choice and access, which was what they were originally promised. So that needs to be our goal, and it will be priority 1 this entire session.
And what are your other top caucus priorities for this session?
Obviously, I think, when I look at the electorate in Minnesota and how we're doing as a state, I think number one, folks would love to see a little more economic growth. They would like to see us recover a little better and stronger from the recession of 10 and 12 years ago. They want good education for their kids. They want good paying jobs. And I think there are things that we can do to make that easier. Frankly, I think we've got to deal with issues like and I think we agree with Governor Dayton that there is an issue on racial disparities, but the answer for us is making sure that we close the achievement gap. There's no it's not a coincidence that we have one of the highest racial disparities in the country, income disparities, and that we also have the highest achievement gap. A minority student in the Minneapolis School District has less than a 50% chance of graduating from high school, and that's shameful. So we need to make sure that even the poorest student in the Minneapolis School District has the same ability and right to the parents do to put their kids into a private school or a charter school or whatever situation is best for them. And so we're going to work on those kinds of issues, and hopefully we can work together with the governor on those. But I would say we want to provide some tax relief to Minnesotans. Frankly, we're collecting more money than we need. That's what a surplus is. We've got more money than we need from Minnesotans, and we really think that one of the best investments would be to give that money back to Minnesotans so that they can use it to help grow Minnesota's economy. So tax relief, job and economic growth. We want to make sure that we're providing some education choices to improve the achievement gap, and of course, health care will be priority number one.
What would you like to see in a comprehensive transportation bill, and do you think that could be passed this session?
Well, I do think it can be. Obviously, the holdup in the last session was transit, and our caucus is not against transit, but what the Democrats were asking for was a 260% increase in transit funding, and I think that just, frankly, was too much. They were asking for too much. They weren't being reasonable. So I think they are looking at and exploring some other options as well for transit. But on the road and bridge side, I think we'll spend the beginning of the session really kind of analyzing what is the need and making sure that we understand what the problem is and what the need is, and then we'll certainly look for a long-term stable funding source for that. And that may include some general fund money, as we have said in the past, and we think that's reasonable. It's tough when you have right now a $1.4 billion surplus. A year ago it was a $2 billion surplus. It's tough when you've got that big of a surplus, and I think this is where the governor has failed to connect with Minnesotans. It's tough to say, hey, we have a $2 billion surplus or a $1.4 billion surplus, but what we need to do to solve this most basic of problems is to increase more taxes and to take more money from Minnesota families. It's a tough sell. And I think Minnesotans don't want a gas tax increase, but they also do want their roads and bridges paid for and improved in a way that they think is adequate. So it's not going to be easy, it's going to be challenging, but I think we do have a good opportunity to get it done.
It's a long way till May 22nd. When that date arrives, what will be accomplished so that you can tell Minnesotans that 2017 was a successful session?
Well, hopefully, number one, we're going to reform our MNsure and health insurance individual market in Minnesota, provide some stability there. Hopefully, we can say that we balanced the state's budget and did it with keeping spending the same. I'd love to reduce it, but at the least, keeping it the same. If we can provide some tax relief back to Minnesota families and get some of the bureaucratic red tape out of the way so that Minnesota employers can grow and thrive, and that's obviously going to help all Minnesotans. And if we can, make some headway at the achievement gap and put some policies in place that frankly will give all Minnesota students a better opportunity to be successful. And if we can, hopefully solve the road and bridge funding problem in the future, I would consider that a very, very successful session. And those will be our goals, and that will be our target that we'll be shooting for all session.